Have a good total weekend. Hey, Jack, I already started the recording, so you can fire up whenever you're ready.
All right, can you guys see the screen?
Yep.
Fantastic. Delbert, are you there?
I am here, sir.
All right. Delbert and I were joking that this is Friday the 13th and his last name is Murphy's Law. So we're hoping that between those two, we've canceled out anything that the demo gods are going to offer up to us. So again, my name is Jack Bender. I'm a cloud solution architect focusing in data and AI. Delbert is one of my colleagues as well. We both are tied to the manufacturing enterprise organizational unit. So we just specifically work with manufacturers in the US. We are the last presentation of the day. We tried to keep our PowerPoints to, we have 9. For the most part, what we are going to do is we are going to jump into the product, show you the product, how it works. Some of this will be might be repetitive of what you've seen in the last session, but again, we're going to go in and give you some great examples of what you can do with Azure Synapse Analytics Workspace. So bear with me here. This is a little bit of a build slide here as this comes in. The first thing that we want to talk about is Azure Synapse Analytics has a great integration with Azure Data Lake, especially Data Lake Gen 2. And as you start to use Synapse, the integration piece that you'll see looks eerily similar to Data Factory, and that is by design. So you'll see pipelines, you'll see data flows, you'll see data sets, and so forth. Analytics runtime, well, you know, we've always seen SQL, but what is this Spark thing over here to the right? And you know, this is the new world we've had, and I shouldn't really say new because it's been a while that Satya has been our leader, where you know, we respond to the market. If the market is doing a lot with big data and Spark, then we want to be able to provide that within our tool set. So that is something that you'll see and we'll showcase today. For the form factors, there's provision. So you'll hear SQL dedicated pools. I like the joke that SQL pools is the artist formerly known as SQL Data Warehouse. And then also we have SQL On Demand. And what I really like about SQL On Demand is I can start to do schema on read of data that is in my data lake. It could be a CSV file. It could be multiple CSV files. It could be multiple folders of CSV files or JSON files or parquet files as well. And then the languages that you can use across this. Well, everybody expects SQL and .NET, but now you're starting to see there's Python, there's Java, there's Scala, there's R. So we have the ability to use those other components. And then what you're going to see us showcase really today is Synapse Analytics Studio. What I really like about Synapse Analytics Studio is it brings it all together in one window. I'll have multiple tabs within that window, but I'm not jumping around the Azure portal trying to look into my data lake, trying to open a data factory job, you know, doing something with SQL, whether that's SQL Server Management Studio or Azure Data Explorer or so forth. So these slides here, I'm just going to let those build, and we're going to talk about what we're going to showcase today. So for today, you know, like I highlighted before, the unified experience, which is Azure Synapse Studio. And we're going to go in and I'm going to look at some of the data that I have in the data lake. With that too, I'm going to then use a little bit of Apache Spark integration and take a look at running a notebook or two. And Delbert's really going to get into that. And I'll showcase the Power BI integration. And you saw that in the last hour, and we'll show you some of those pieces as well. I'm a traditionalist. I like Power BI Desktop. So I'll show you how you can drop this into Power BI Desktop. If you want to stay within Synapse and use the web experience of the Power BI workspace, well, you can do that too. And then Delbert's going to really jump in, say, for like the last 20, 25 minutes, and really go into the Azure machine learning integration. And then we'll do a little bit of a Q&A as well. So I like to joke, if we're on a ski slope, I'm going to take you down the greens and blues, and then Delbert's going to show you some of the machine learning and Spark integration and take you on the blacks and the double blacks. This is the last slide I'm going to show you before the demo, and we jump right into the product. So there's a couple different areas that we'll touch on. There's the overview or home page. There is the data page. That's where your data sources are, whether they are linked or whether they are native to the service, and we'll walk you through those. Where I spend most of my time in Synapse is in the develop area. Those are where my SQL scripts are, where my notebooks could be. So it could also be my data flows and also Power BI. Orchestrate, that is your pipelines. So think of that like your data factory pipelines. And then if you're familiar with data factory, where you have your monitor and manage areas. So I want to monitor a job I'm running. I want to be able to manage that information as well. So with that, I'm going to now jump into the actual product itself, because again, it is the afternoon and I don't want to give you death by PowerPoint. So as we jump in here, the first thing I'm going to do is just talk about Synapse Analytics Workspace. When it shows up within your SQL portal, you have the ability to click on a web URL. And what's important to notice here is this is Workspace's preview. So the stuff that we're showing today. Yeah.
Jack, I think I'm just seeing a demo slide. I'm not seeing your desktop. I don't know if anybody else is having that.
That sounds right to me. Let's do this. Yeah, you guys don't want to imagine. You want to see.
We're from Missouri, the show me state.
So let me know if you can see the screen now.
We got it now. Yes, sir. Okay.
So let's say I'm in my home area, and again, I want to figure out Synapse, and I do a search on Synapse, and you'll see here there's this Workspaces preview, and Synapse Analytics, formerly DW, that's your data warehouse. What we're going to jump in today is the Workspace. And I'm going to come in and just click through my Workspace. And again, this looks just like any other resource within the Azure portal. And I can see I got my overview. I've got some of the other pieces. I've got my SQL pools. So these are my dedicated SQL pools. Those are your data warehouses. So we've got 2 of them running here. And we've also got an Apache Spark pool. And then you'll see some of the other pieces as well. And then again, on the overview page, I have the ability to click on the webs. I can go right to that URL, and I've already got that open here. So I'm going to come into it over here, and as I look at that information, now what I'm going to do is let's jump into this and take a look at some of the information within here. So we've got our home, and I'm going to come into the data area. And there's 2 pieces of the data area. There's the workspace area. So these are my databases. So anything that's got that little cylinder there, that's a dedicated SQL pool. Anything that's got like the little power button next to it, that's SQL on demand. So that's allowing me to query against the ADLS Gen 2, and we'll get in and show that. And then also, here's my Spark engine as well. So now I'm going to come into the linked area, and what's neat with linked is I've got blob storage, I've got Cosmos, I've got Gen 2, I've got my integration data sets, so just like Data Factory, think of those. And if I wanted to add another linked data set, I could even, just to kick the tires on the program here, I can go into the gallery. And I've got a lot of great options within here. If I want to start looking at some of the data, we can look at some of the New York taxi data and just some of the other pieces within there as well. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to close out of this, and I'm going to come back in, and I've got some New York taxi cab data loaded in a couple of different fashions. And what I've done is this here is my ADLS Gen 2 account, this JB Synapse storage account. Then I'm going to go right here into my container, or my file system, and I'm going to click on that, and then I've got a bunch of folders within here. So I can see the various folders. These are my for-hire vehicles, green cab, yellow cab, Uber data. I've curated some of this data, and I'm going to go in and look at the Uber data. So when I go ahead and double click on that, I can see I have multitude of CSV files here. And I'm going to just resort this here because I want to get to these top ones. So again, normally if you weren't in Synapse Analytics Workspace, you might have to open up Data Explorer. You might have another tab that you're opening to go into your data lake, to your storage account to preview that. What I want to do with this information is I want to look at some of the Uber data in the warmer months. So I'm going to pick May, June, July, August. We'll go April too. And now I'm just going to do a right click here, and I'm going to pick a new notebook, and I'm going to load that to a data frame. Now, I haven't really primed up my notebook here, so when I run this, this may take a little while, and we'll go and do other things. But again, here's the language. That's Python. I could have done this in Scala, C# or Spark SQL. I'm a Transact SQL person myself, so anytime I can get into anything SQL, I'll go that route. I'm going to go ahead and run this. And as this is running, it's going to start a Spark compute session for me here. Once this thing is warm and it's running, it takes seconds. The very first time I run it, it will take a little bit to get going. So while this is going within here, there's a couple things I can do. I'm going to go ahead and save this off as a notebook. So I'll call this my JB demo notebook. And we'll take a look at this a little later on. And I'm going to go ahead and just publish this. So very similar to what you've seen with the Data Factory experience. As I go ahead and I publish this information, I could have added, just like any Jupyter notebook within here, I could have also added an extra cell within here. So if I just wanted to add a text cell, you know, I could go ahead and put here down my markdown cell. So these are my parquet files read from ADOS 2. And I'll go ahead and click out of that. And again, I can publish that out. Now what I want to do is let's jump a little bit more back into these CSV files. So now I'm going to come over to the CSV file. And I just want to look at the April CSV file for the Uber data. And as I come into here, there's a couple things I could do. The first thing I could do is I could just preview it. What do I have? So I got a date, I got a lat, lon, and the base. And as I look at the base, it's not really that helpful to me, but it is there. So this is one way I can look at the data. The other way I can look at that data is now I can start to do a new SQL script, and I can grab the top 100 rows. And I'm going to go ahead, and this is going to use SQL on demand. And I'm going to go ahead and just run this. And you know what I'll do, just so I get a little more space here. So as you can look here, it's saying top 100, and it's grabbing from that CSV file. There are ways I can change this where I'm just looking at the folder, but I'll go ahead and run this here. And again, this is running against SQL on demand, my master database within SQL on demand. And typically, you'll see this is going to return the results pretty quick, but I got a header row there. So let me just make a quick modification here. Oh, hardest thing I always have is typing. That's my biggest challenge during any demo. And I'll go ahead and run this again. And now when I run this, I can see now it's the way I expected. It's showing me my date, time, my lat, my lon, my base information, and so forth. But now coming back to the CSV file, when I look at this CSV file, what I also want to do is maybe I want to give Delbert access to this file. And let's say Delbert just doesn't have access to it. So I'm going to go ahead and add Delbert. And I will go ahead for access and give him read access to that. And I'll go ahead and save that off. And when I save that off, it'll disappear from view. So we'll come back into the access. And now we can see it's within there. So I can give it. And when I highlight Delbert, I can see it's just read. Now I can take away as well. So I can click on that and take that away. On the file itself, I can also see the properties of that file. So I can see the URL. I can see the, the Azure, I can see the Azure Blob File System URL path as well, and I can see that information too. So there's a lot of good stuff that we're looking at within here. Let's go ahead and let's see if our notebook has returned any results yet. So our notebook is still humming there, and we'll give that about another minute or two. It's the demo gods. It's a Friday. They always want to take a little longer. We've looked at a CSV file. Let's start taking a look at some parquet data. So now what I'll do is I'll go into my yellow curated. And as I go into that, I can see I've got a few parquet files within. Now with one of these parquet files, I'll just go ahead and do a new SQL script as well. And I'll go ahead and I'll do select top 100 rows. And notice for parquet, I don't have to specify everything that I was doing for CSV. I just tell it it's parquet. and it's going to return that data for me. So anytime you're doing any of these transact SQL statements with SQL on demand, if you're reading against Parquet, it's always easier. For CSV, you may have to put a little bit more logic within there as well. I can also do external tables, so I'm going to go ahead and just discard that. And if I wanted to here, I could even do a bulk load of this data here, highlight a few of them, and I can start to go ahead and go continue. I can say it's a Parquet file. It's detecting the schema. I can pick which dedicated SQL pool I want to put this into. I want to create a brand new table. I'll call it yellow curated. And now what I like about this too is I can even open up the script. So now it gives me a script to work so that as I load that data within the yellow curated table, it shows me that information. It shows me the data that it's going to bring in and so forth. So this is a great example of how to do that. So now I'm going to come back to my Spark job, and my Spark job is just, I was going to say it was mocking me. Now I can see I've got the data load there for the Spark session there, but you know what I forgot? I forgot the header part too. So if header exists, I need to comment or uncomment this row. Let's run it again. We saw that first time it took a little while, and that's okay. That second time it came back pretty darn quick. So I can see that within the data there. So now I can start to create my Spark notebook. I can do what I need to there. I can publish that within. So I've showed you a little bit around the data tab, and what I want to do is I want to bring some data into that data tab. And I'm going to close out these, and I'm going to come back to my Uber file or folder, and I'm going to get rid of all the data there. I want it to go away momentarily because I want to show you how I can bring this data in from another cloud. So we're going to go through, and I'm going to come over here to this other cloud that's out there. You know, I hear it's used, and I'm going to go in and look at an S3 bucket that I have. Now it is Friday afternoon, so when I look at this S3 bucket, I can see I'm very tempted to look at US breweries, but sadly there just isn't enough data to do what I want to do there. So I'm going to go ahead and look at NYC Uber pickups. And I'm going to go into that, and one of the folders that I have, those are the same files that we were just looking at, and we're going to bring them in to Synapse Analytics. And for the most part, the files are pretty small. The Uber raw data, June's, you know, about a half a terabyte. When you add the rest of these up, you're probably looking at about 3/4 terabyte, and that's just important to remember. So now that we've looked there, let's kind of figure out what we're going to do here. And I said I would stay away from PowerPoints, but I've got one more slide, or two more. So these are all the connectors that are out of the box. So we're going to use pipeline functionality here. So very similar to what you would do in Data Factory, eerily similar, and that's by design. So our car hire for data that's in AWS, we're going to bring all that Lyft. I want to look at the Lyft data. Even though it's an Uber folder, I'm going to go ahead and look at Lyft. And you'll notice that there's 3 fields in there. There's time of trip, and it's a date time field. Well, it's sort of. It's not really, and we're going to have to manipulate it a little. We've got a start latitude and a start longitude. So what we're going to do with Synapse Pipelines is I'm going to go out to AWS, that S3 bucket, grab that data, bring it into a data lake, and then I'm going to use Synapse SQL on Demand to read that data. And then I'm going to visualize that in Power BI. And all of this data is really around the New York City, looking at the 5 different boroughs. So you got, you know, Manhattan, Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island. So as we look at that data, we'll go ahead and take a look at some of that information. So we're going to come back in here, and now I'm going to go into my Synapse Workspace, and I'm going to go to Pipelines. And I've got this pipeline here that's load AWS Uber to ADLS, and it's our Gen 2. And when I click on copy data, I can see here's my source. There's that Uber pickups, and there's the folder that we were looking at before. Here's our sync. We're going to drop it into that folder that we were looking at before. And I'm going to go ahead and just trigger this now. So again, just like you would in Data Factory. So now we can see that that information is going to start to come across. It's running in a minute, or not even a minute. We're going to see data is going to populate in this folder. And just like how Data Factory has a monitor area, we have a monitor area here. So now we can see that this data is in progress. And you can see as it's going here, and it should complete in 30 seconds or less. Now, having said that, let's see what the demo gods think of me. I got 3 seconds left. Oh, of course, it had to do that to me. But as you can see, it'll come through here in a second. It's taking just a little longer. We'll place that bottleneck on the other cloud, is what we'll say is what it is. And as it'll come through, we'll get a message that'll say that the data is complete and that we have our data within. It's really wanting to take its time today. There we go. So 53 seconds. You can see the other 2 times when I went through the trials just to see. And I'm going to come back up in here to develop. And now I can see these files again. So they're the same files we saw before, but now they've got a date timestamp of what we would expect. So remember when I said with the lift data, I'm just going to do a preview real quick. I said date time was sort of. It's got a date, space, hour, colon, minute. And that's okay, but we're going to need to do something with that here. So I'm just going to click OK. And the first thing I'm going to do is I would actually create my SQL on-demand database. So I'd be in master and I created, I've already done this. Think of this like a cooking show. It's already happened. So I've got my database. You create a master key. That is not my password. I've changed that to protect for obvious reasons. We've got create the database. I've got my secret. This is basically a SAS URL that I'm using. Again, this is not my URL. It's not ABCDEFG. And I've got down over here, I've got my SQL on-demand data source. And I didn't use a data source before when I was just doing select top 100 rows. So what does that look like now within my Lift database? What I've done is I've actually created a view within my Lift database called View Lift Rides. And I'm going to go ahead and run this. And as this is running, notice I had to do a little bit of a concatenation of that date field. And it still saw it as a text field. So after that, I got to then cast it to make it a date time. So now I can see time of trip. I can see start latitude. I can see start longitude and so forth. So I've got all of this data within here. And again, it is just a view now that I have. So if I actually have in here, if I go to select from view lift rides and I run this again, I'm going to see the same thing. So now I can see that information. It's the exact same information, but now it's just a view built into that SQL on-demand database here. So I want to look at this data within Power BI, and there's a couple of different ways you can do that. And as you heard before, well, I could just come in here in the previous session where I could go in, and then this is my Power BI workspace, and this is using the web tools, authoring tools, and so forth. I'm a traditionalist. I really like the desktop. Power BI workspace on the web is great, but I want to do this on the desktop. And on the desktop here, I'm going to go into data sets, and I'm going to go ahead and just click new Power BI data set. And now if I highlight Lift, I can download this PBIDS file. And when I open that up, I can then save that off as a PBIX file. The beauty of this file is it's going to have my credentials. It's going to have my connection to my on-demand database. And that's important because when you look at an on-demand database, it actually has a different endpoint here. So this is what you would actually use to connect to for your SQL server, as opposed to say this, as what we typically see. So last thing I want to do here is I'm going to come in and look at my Power BI report. So just to show you how responsive this is just pulling off the view on that on-demand database. And I just adjusted the time slicer here, and you can see the circle of patience was pretty kind to me here as it spins. It goes pretty quick, and I can see that data as it comes through. But maybe one of the things I want to evaluate is on Monday, August 25th, show me what that data looks like just for the 25th, because maybe I'm a Lyft driver and I'm thinking, Monday morning I should hang out at LaGuardia, or maybe I should hang out at JFK because everybody's flying in. But then when you look at what's on the map and you're like, that might not be the way to go. Maybe I should be on Manhattan itself, because there's a lot more Lyft pickups happening here and even in the Dumbo area of Brooklyn. So just being able to visualize this data here, I think is key. And remember, this doesn't live in a dedicated SQL pool. This lives out on ADLS Gen 2, and I'm using SQL on demand to query that data, service it, or serve it up as a view that Power BI can then report on. So this is just some basics of what you can do. At the very end of the presentation, we'll put in some links. But you know, if you want to go around and kick the tires and start to play with this, this is a great way to get started. So with this, I'm going to wrap up here of taking you down the greens and blues on the ski slope, and I'm going to hand it over to Delbert here. Delbert's going to take you on the blacks and the double blacks.
Terrific. Thanks, Jack. Let's see here. I will try and share my screen here. Oh, there we go. Okay. Go ahead, folks, and let me know if you can see that okay.
Yes. Sorry to give you that pregnant pause.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's after a lot of other excitement today. That's very helpful. Thank you. So I guess what I want to do just with one slide here is cover a couple of just kind of set some context. So when we start to move into predictions or into doing machine learning and then doing predictions on our data, and again, I'll stick with the taxi data. There's kind of a pretty standard process, right? We do some feature engineering, we build a model, and then we go ahead and predict based on that model. And in this particular case, we can take a couple of paths. In the SQL pool, we can use CTAS or create table as select, right? Our old friend from data warehousing days all the way back to data Allegro, you know. So we can chain these tables together, create new tables from a new table from our existing one where we've done some feature engineering, and I'm going to show you that one in a second. We can also use our Spark pool, and with Spark we can do things. It's the same thing, only a little different. You just have to squint a little bit differently, and so you could do successive data frames, and you would move the data from your bronze area to your silver to your gold area, right? And when you get the data refined and in a nice tabular form and it's sitting in gold, then you can point Power BI at it, or you can point your machine learning algorithm at it and have good data, okay? And then next we'll build a model. And again, in the Spark pool, we can build a machine learning model. It needs to be in Onyx, so we need to convert it to the Open Neural Network Exchange protocol, and then register that in Azure Machine Learning Service, okay? If we build a model in our Azure Machine Learning Service compute, we can also do that, and it's the same, basically the same basic process. Okay, so you could do that in either compute source, and I'll put a plugin here. I was hoping to demo this, but I really don't have enough time. In AMLS, you can also use the AutoML feature, right, to try a whole bunch of different models. I produce a whole bunch of different models and see which one has the best characteristics for your particular situation. And I like to stress to data scientists and stuff who haven't maybe seen AutoML before, it's a great way to just throw a bunch of data at an automated process and let it try a bunch of different things. And then the best model you can take and make better. And so I think it's kind of the automation of our field of data science. So that's building the model. And then all we have to do is from Synapse, our Synapse workspace, using a linked service, of course, just like you would in Data Factory. Use a linked service to pull the model out of the Azure Machine Learning Model Registry and use that in your predict, and the T-SQL predict statement we saw in the last session can predict against can use the model to generate predictions from a SQL table in your SQL pool. So with that, I'm going to jump into, is that the right? Yeah, that looks good. Okay. I'm going to jump into the analytics workspace again here. And so this is the CTAS statement to begin with. So I'm going to create this new table called Yellow Cab Training. And I'm just going to throw everything in a round robin distribution. And this is a 521 million row data set. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to chop it off just for demo purposes here at 1 million rows. And so, and then I'm going to go ahead and select it. So I'm going to start that up. The idea here is that I'm taking this TPEP pickup date time, right, which is one of those long date times, just that Jack had cast some of the Uber data into. Ah, cool, it's back. So what I'm doing is I'm for my predictive model, I want to do things like the year. I want to extract the year out of here, and the month, and the day, and the day of the month, and then what weekday is it? Monday through Friday? Is it Monday, Tuesday? Is it Friday? And I'm going to use that in. I can use that to generate a machine learning model that'll help me figure out, hey, what locations, depending on the time of day, where should I look to hang out to get the best overall this total amount, right? The best payment amount. So that's kind of the idea. And so my training data set here, I went ahead and got the top 100 rows, and we see, okay, here's this location ID, which is basically it roughly corresponds to a neighborhood inside of New York City. And then I've got the year, the month, the day of the week, and the total amount of my fare. Okay, so that gives me the training data set that I can start with. And if you noticed when Jack was showing the pulling data in from public data sets from Microsoft's public data sets, one of those data sets was on COVID-19. And one of the things I was thinking is, as we're getting to another spike here in cases, as a driver, maybe I would want to know, hey, where's the highest number of cases, and maybe I'll pick up somewhere else for a while. So that's another way that you can start bringing in this external data to help inform, using machine learning to inform the rest of your efforts, the rest of your predictions. And so here, I'm going to jump now into a Spark model. So over here, I was in the SQL taxi, so that's a SQL pool. And now I'm going to jump into the Spark pool. And I'm running, as Jack was showing, I'm going to run PySpark. And then I can go ahead and I'm going to run this whole thing to generate this machine learning model. Oh, come on. Try that again. All right. Not sure I was. getting some difficulties earlier, but anyway, this I'll walk you through this notebook here while it's starting up. I'm not quite sure. Usually it even gives you a warning that you're waiting for a session or something if you're waiting for something. But anyway, this is given the latest Python distributions, importing package resources and then going through your package resources working set is now how you do this. I opened a request with the feature request with the documentation team to update the, using pip, because you don't want to use the pip internal classes anymore. Those are deprecated. So that's this first cell is just to make sure I've got the right packages loaded. And then this next cell, I'm going to pull, I'm going to try refreshing this because this is looking suspicious.
It does say running on the bottom there, Delbert. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. Anyway. So then the next piece here is this particular notebook. I'm going to pull some things from the public Azure ML open data sets on the taxi stuff, and then go ahead and featureize some of this data. So here's some additional features that we're just going to put in our local data frame here, our local pandas data frame. And so this will create a little categorical feature based on the time of day. So is it the morning rush, the afternoon, the evening rush, or nighttime? And then some other features. And then what I can do is go ahead and split the data set. This is a standard thing that you do, right? You put a bunch of, you put 70% of your data into the training data set to train your machine learning model. And then you turn around and hold 30% out so that you can test that against the model to see how accurate your model is. I don't know why it said cancel. Okay, I'm gonna try running this cell here and see what the deal is, because it was working a few minutes ago. If that's any consolation to anyone. And so what you can do then is this part here, just using a pipeline a scikit-learn pipeline to train the particular machine learning model. And this is just a little logistic regression model to say whether or not you were able to, something went wrong while processing your request. I do not know if this one's going to work for it. Oh, now it's starting the session up?
We did not make the proper sacrifice to the demo gods today.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, no, I'm not sure about that one. We'll have to dig into that one. So if we go ahead, this is a key point here, and then we can jump into the next steps here, and that is that we need to convert this model to Onyx format. So we've got a model here that we've trained, right? We've done the fit right here, and so then this will also check our testing data set against the fitted model, and so we can check our score there. So it will it'll come back with a score here in a second, I hope. And then here what we're doing is we need to convert this model to Onyx format, and so there are some type casting we kind of have to do to go ahead and convert that model over. And the key here really is this method right here. This is very helpful. It's called infer signature. And what you need to do is the Onyx model has to have each individual feature in your machine learning model identified as a separate column, because the predict statement inside a T-SQL matches the Onyx model column with the table column that you're looking to do the prediction over. And usually in scikit-learn especially, this is like a classic pattern that they use. You usually have a vector of features and a vector that's returned that has your prediction in it. And so what you have to do is break that vector up into pieces so that each piece can line up to a column in your SQL table to do your predict. And so that's kind of the key there. Okay, cool. I got an answer back now. So I'm going to run the whole shebang here real quick. And I'm also going to move on. We're going to let this go. And I'm going to come to the next piece, which is, once we've got the model, let's pretend that we've successfully registered our model at the bottom here. So this is where we actually we connect to my Azure Machine Learning Workspace here, and then we call the ML flow to register this model into my machine learning workspace. So if I go ahead and go back over here to my New York City taxi thing, I see machine learning right here. So I can say enrich this particular table with the machine learning model. Okay, so I'm going to do that. And so this is going to connect via that link service to my machine learning workspace. And you can see here we've got 4 different versions of the model. And this one was one that I did just a little while ago. Anyway, so we can say, yeah, I'd like version 4. And so this is a little wizard that's going to pull my Onyx model out of Azure Machine Learning Service and drop it into my Synapse Analytics workspace. And so here's some mappings, and these turned out really well because of that infer signature trick that we did in the notebook. So I can say go ahead and continue. And then here I can give it a stored procedure name, and I can either give it an existing table or tell it to create a new table. And then I would go ahead and generate that. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to cancel this, and I'm going to show you the one that I did that I successfully created. So this was, I ran this already to create this stored procedure. And so in this case, we can just run the stored proc, and that'll show us our predictions. So you see here that if I I'm gonna pick up at nighttime, and I'm looking about, well, should I expect a tip or not? So the idea here is that if I pick up in the PM rush and I've got just a quick trip, then I will get a tip. So the ones are when I'm getting a tip, and the zeros are when I'm not getting a tip. So that's the model's prediction. Okay. So I think I can show you one more thing here real quick, and that is my link service that lets me connect to my machine learning workspace. So here's the deal. Here's how I can connect. So, and it works. I'll test the connection. We just saw it work. So that's how we bridge between the machine learning service and Azure Synapse, and we're gonna see more and more of that kind of introduction going forward. And I think this is probably a good spot. Give us maybe 16 minutes for questions.
Yeah, agreed. And I think the thing that was neat, if you looked at it, so my example told you where to be, like this is where you're going to get the most pickups, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a tip. So what Delbert was able to do is enhance on what I showed for visualization and say, here's where you should be and at what time you should be to get the best tips.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing too, we also have a special guest on as well. So we have Santosh on as well. He is one of the program managers for Azure Synapse Analytics. So if you have any questions, you can put them in the window, or go ahead and come off of mute and just ask your questions. And again, if it's because it's Friday afternoon, it's you're ready to call it a day. We understand that too. This deck itself is uploaded as well. We have some links in there, and I think we've even updated that too, so that if you want to see some of the information around Azure Azure Synapse Workspace with regards to general documentation, to a couple quick start tutorials of stuff that we showed, they're all there. And happy to reach out to us if you want to. Again, my name is Jack Bender, and Delbert, is my partner in crime here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys very much. We certainly appreciate it. If you have any questions, you just come off mute and ask. And if not, I'm going to go ahead and hit stop recording, and you guys can go ahead and have yourself a great week.